Hello, and welcome back to France Made Simple, the podcast where I demystify life in France. Now, the last episode was all about keeping your renovation costs under control, and I had a lot of positive feedback about this, which was really nice. But one thing that came up was people asking how one goes about knowing roughly how much you're in for before you start. So, by popular request, I've come up with what I'm going to call a renovation checklist. It's a sort of outline that if you work your way through it when you're viewing a property, it should help you get an accurate handle on the eventual overall cost. So, without further ado, I'm going to start by saying, ideally, don't let your heart rule your head. Now, this is because restoring a French property is a lifelong dream for many people. And yes, bringing an old building back to life can be hugely satisfying. However, it is also incredibly hard work, and escalating costs can all too often just turn into a complete nightmare. But if you can keep a firm handle on the costs from the outset, and this means being realistic about the amount of work and time involved, it can, notice I said can, help prevent the project from spiralling out of control. And I think that property renovation is all about being realistic. And successful projects are those where the owners have been realistic from the outset, both about the state of the property and their own ability to take on a renovation project. Now, obviously, finances also play a vital role, and any renovation project which is severely underfunded is going to prove very, very difficult, if not impossible. You can get through it, but it's going to make it that much harder. So I would say that the first thing to consider when you're viewing any property, the first thing really is your own skill level and experience. Now, you may have extensive property renovation in the UK or elsewhere, but things are often very different in France, and it's going to take time to get to grips with the local way of working and doing stuff. Now, if your skills are limited to what I would term gentle DIY or decoration, which mine were when I arrived in France, then by all means consider tackling bigger projects. But remember that it's going to take you longer than a professional or somebody with more experience, because you're going to be effectively learning as you go along. And there are also bound to be things that are going to require you bringing in a qualified expert, and it's important to be aware of this. I think also, if this is the first renovation project you've tackled, it's very, very easy to underestimate the amount of work and time involved. And you will also need to have the vision to imagine the finished result and an understanding of the building processes that are involved in achieving that result. So it's a very, very good idea to draw up what we're going to call the renovation checklist before you view any property. Because when you're on site, it's all too easy to get carried away with an enthusiasm. Just, you see the building, the sun shining, you see the potential, and before you know it, your head has ruled. No, your heart has ruled your head. That's the right way around, Catherine. And I think equally, it's hard to remember all of the things that need to be covered. And if you have a list, ideally a typed one, so it looks really official and efficient, it's a really great help. Certainly, it's much easier for me to work like that from a list. And this list is going to be especially useful if you decide not to have any kind of professional survey carried out, because the vast majority of the items on the list are going to apply to most properties. And surveys are not particularly common in France, so it is a very good idea to think about all the elements yourself. So, how do we go about this? I think the simplest way is to list all of the parts of the house that need to be covered, and then leave space alongside to note what needs to be done. Then you can calculate the costs involved. So the first item on the checklist, nothing to do with the condition of the property. It should be the price. And your question should be, is the property being sold via an agent? And if so, are the fees included? How much are the fees? Is there any room for negotiation? Because even if the sellers are not prepared to negotiate on price, the agents may well be prepared to reduce their fee. Now, you also need to ask, what are the seller's circumstances? If they're keen to move, they may be more flexible on price if you can offer to complete the transaction quickly. So that's your first element, or your box, or your number one on your list. The next thing is services. Now, these need to be factored in, as these are all things that can add considerably to your budget if they need to be installed. So your questions here are, is there a mains water supply? Is there a well? Is there an electrical supply? If so, does the wiring need replacing? If the property isn't on mains drainage, which is going to be the case for most rural French properties, check if there is a septic tank. If there is, does it conform to current norms, or is it going to need to be upgraded? Now you can look at the outbuildings, and people, myself included, often get very enthusiastic when they realise that the dream property includes a range of outbuildings. But unless you are exceptionally lucky, these outbuildings are also going to require work, which of course is going to add to your overall renovation cost. And they may even be in such poor condition that they require immediate attention or even demolition to make them safe. So I think the first question here is, what are the buildings going to be used for? Now, is this something that can wait? Maybe it's conversion to living space, or are they going to be needed immediately, maybe for storage for your belongings during the renovation? Are they sound, secure and watertight? And if not, what needs to be done to make them so? Again, none of these things are insurmountable, but it's all areas of the whole overall budget that you need to address. Now, looking at the main house or building, the first area to look at is the roof. A building with a solid watertight roof is going to be in far better overall condition than one that's been suffering from water ingress, especially if this has been happening over a period of time. If it's clear that the roof needs replacing, then obviously you need to budget for that. And you also need to be aware that the fabric of the buildings, the wall, the ceilings, the floors, and so forth, they may have been extensively damaged, and they may need to be either repaired or replaced. Even if the roof looks to be in reasonable condition, always investigate further. And your question should be, are the tiles missing or damaged? Is the ridge line straight or sagging? Is the chimney stack in good condition? Are there areas of mortar or flashing that are missing? Repairing a roof can mean as little as replacing a few tiles to reinforcing the entire timber structure, and obviously the costs are going to vary enormously according to the amount of work involved. Now, roofing can be a major expense, and it can also delay the entire renovation project. Unless you're really confident in your abilities to spot any potential problems and accurately cost out the work involved, I think at this point taking expert advice is a really good idea. If you're serious about purchasing the property, and the roof isn't clearly 100% sound, I would advise trying to get at least 2 roofing contractors to come and inspect the roof and provide a quote for any remedial work required. I know this is easier said than done when it comes to getting quotes in France, but if you do have a proper quote, it will also strengthen your position if you're trying to negotiate on the price. Now, turn your attention to things that are attached to the roof, like gutters and downpipes. Check to see if they're damaged, broken or blocked, because if so, water may have damaged the building further. Now, if water's been collecting at the base of the building in one place for some time, this can lead to serious movement in the walls, and they may even need underpinning, which again is going to add to your budget. Inspect the walls themselves closely. Are they straight? Are they well pointed? Are there any cracks or bulges? Are there any potential weak points, for example, where people might have made new openings without the correct or adequate lintels or masonry. And believe me, this happens more than you would imagine in France. Cracks and bulges are not always the end of the world, and generally they need to be monitored over time to establish if the building is continuing to move. But the cause of the problem also needs to be found, as this is going to have a bearing on the cost of the eventual repair. So what could these causes be? They could be water ingress from above the roof, which if you stop it resolves the problem. Water ingress from the ground level, so drainage problems, weak foundations, non-existent foundations, or even subsidence. And again, if there are any major cracks or bulges, I would say that taking some professional advice is a sensible course of action and is likely to save you money in the long run. Moving inside, you're going to need to check the condition of doors and windows. Now, if they're all beyond repair and are going to need to be entirely replaced, this is going to substantially increase your budget. It may be that they're salvageable, or it may be that you can replace them gradually over a period of time, but that still needs to go into the budget. The same goes for shutters and any other external woodwork. And when you go inside the property, try and establish if there's any obvious smell of damp, because this can be a problem. Try and work out where it's coming from, and don't rely on it being merely due to the house being shut up for some time. There's musty and there's damp. So if the walls have been lined with wood panelling, very often the case in older French properties, you sort of up to waist height, check to see if this has been done to hide a damp problem. And if there is an attic, make sure you have a good poke around up there. Make sure you've got a torch with you. You can look at the ceilings for stains, damp patches or mould, and always be suspicious in older properties of any recently redecorated areas, because that can have been done to hide a kind of ongoing damp problem. And I think it's important to stress that older properties wouldn't have had any damp-proof measures. So damp at floor level is quite likely, as the tiles or flagstones would have been laid directly onto the earth. And, this isn't the end of the world. But again, something to be aware of. You need to check all the woodwork for any signs of rot or insect or woodworm infestation, and in many areas of France termites are a massive problem, and in these areas the seller is required by law to give you a report detailing whether or not the building is clear of termites. But assume that if you are buying in a termite area and it's an older property, you will almost certainly need to treat for termites. Now, most renovation projects come without a heating or hot water system, but if there is one, try and find out if it actually currently works. That's not a given, trust me. And again, most projects are going to be without kitchens or bathrooms, or they're going to need replacing or upgrading, but it's a good idea to add these to your checklist so that you can factor in the costs. Now, if you're certain that you need a certain number of bathrooms, for example, or that a large farmhouse-style kitchen is an essential on your list, it's non-negotiable, even if that means moving walls and extensive work inside, then list these requirements. It's absolutely fine to have specific requirements, but they all come at a price, so they need to go into the budget. And as you view the property, you can then work out whether these elements, your 3 bathrooms or 5 bathrooms or galley kitchen or large kitchen, you can work out whether they can be incorporated easily or simply, or whether including them is going to really add to your budget. Don't forget to check out access and make sure that all the kind of plant and machinery you're going to need during the renovation project is going to be able to get on site easily. Now, most problems can be worked around, but again, difficult access is going to increase your costs. So if you approach your property visit like this, I think it reaps dividends. It gives you a good grasp of the work and the costs involved from the outset, which in theory will keep it stress-free. Obviously, it never works out like that. But the more, the old forewarned is forearmed expression is very, very true when it comes to renovating in France. And when you are carrying out your visit, maybe it's a second visit or a third visit, make sure you take your phone or your camera along and take loads and loads of photos to help you refer back. And then you can also show those to experts in case of any queries or questions. And even if you can't get a roofer to come out and give you a quote, you could pop into their office, whatever, show them the photos and say, look, could you just give me some quick advice on this, roughly, benchmark figure, whole lot off, or, patching up. That's quite a good little trick, that one, actually. Make sure you have a tape measure to take accurate measurements. Take a torch with you, obviously, maybe a head torch. Binoculars if you don't have a phone that's powerful enough to give you kind of, closing in on hard to access areas, or maybe binoculars for seeing what's on the horizon. Is there a duck farm over the brow of the hill kind of thing? But your list is really the most important thing. So on the list, the essentials are the price, services, the roof, the walls, the outbuildings, the doors, the windows, the joinery, the heating system, and the access. And if you want a really accurate ballpark, not really accurate ballpark figure, but a good ballpark figure, I think if you go through each item and work through it and think about everything that's involved, you will get there. I hope that's been useful. And as always, please do get in touch if you've got any questions. And if you're even thinking about buying in France, I highly recommend visiting the French property exhibition run by the France Media Group, which is taking place at the end of January in London. Tickets are free and they're available now. I'm going to add the booking link into the show notes so you can just click on there and reserve your tickets directly. There will be thousands of properties available to look at, loads of different agents, and a selection of daily seminars over the 2 days hosted by experts. And they cover everything you need to know about tax, mortgages, finance, you name it. It's a really good day out and an absolute must for anyone thinking about buying here in France. So as always, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.